Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order when you check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Sports Pictorium Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. If he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL helmet poster. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
The New York Rangers of the early 1970s were special, and they had a special bond with their fans. The names on that team are legendary, and 3 have had their numbers retired: Eddie Jacquemin, Rod Gilbert, and just recently, Jean Ratelle. Some think Brad Park should have been honored as well. However, the one man whose number has not been hoisted to the rafters yet, and was just as important as all of them and might have been the glue to the team, was Vic Hadfield. And next season, the 2018-2019 season, Hadfield's number 11 will rightfully be raised high over the garden ice. And next, on Sports Forgotten Heroes, we'll take a look back at the career of the first man to ever score 50 goals in a season for the New York Rangers, Vic Hadfield.
This is Sports Forgotten Heroes, a tribute to the stars who shaped the games we love to watch and the games we love to play. Stars who provided us with many thrills, but when their time was up, they faded away. We'll take a look back at their spectacular careers, their moments of fame, even if it was just for one season or just one game. And now, here's your host, Warren Rogan.
Hello and welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about someone whom I consider to be one of the most underrated and underappreciated stars from years ago in the NHL, Vic Hadfield. You see, when the New York Rangers needed someone to step up and protect their top players, Hadfield was the man to do so. Without him, the Rangers might never have become the super team they were in the early 1970s. Sure, they didn't win the Stanley Cup, but a bounce here, a call there, or just one break along the way, and the Rangers might have won a few cups. They did make it to the finals in 1972, but the Bobby Orr-led Boston Bruins took them out in 6 games. Joining the podcast in just a moment will be George Grimm, author of We Did Everything But Win, a terrific look back at those Ranger teams of the late 60s and early 70s. And what an appropriate title. Because the Rangers did everything they could but hoist the cup. First, though, just a little housekeeping. This episode of Sports Forgotten Heroes is sponsored by Audible. With Audible, you get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/sportsfh. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Audible's a great way to show your support for Sports Forgotten Heroes and a terrific way to listen to your favorite books, especially when you're on the run. Give it a try free at www.audibletrial.com/sportsfh. Like I said before, I have several audiobooks in my queue, some of which I've listened to for Sports Forgotten Heroes. Check out Audible. It's really a great service, and some of the talent to read the books is really good. And it's free for 30 days. I also invite you to visit the Sports Forgotten Heroes Patreon page at patreon.com/sportsfh. That's patreon.com/sportsfh. Every day there's a sports quiz, information on upcoming podcasts, historical notes about sports, the heroes we talk about, and there's a lot more coming too. It's also a great way to show your support for Sports Forgotten Heroes. Again, that's patreon.com/sportsfh. Follow Sports Forgotten Heroes on Twitter at SportsFHeroes. Look for our page on Facebook or visit Sports Forgotten Heroes on the web at sportsfh.com. Now, Vic Hadfield. He was, as they say, tough as nails, and that's what was expected of him when he joined the Rangers, to add some grit to what was then a rather small lineup. And being small was a huge problem, especially for the team's top two forwards, Jean Ratelle and Rod Gilbert. They were constantly getting roughed up by the opposing team's tough guys, and after one particularly bad night in Toronto, Rangers coach Emile Francis had seen enough and put Hadfield on their line. And what a difference it made. Not only did it open up the ice for Ratelle and Gilbert to show their stuff and blossom into the superstars everyone thought they would become, it also allowed Hadfield to display an offensive game that really no one knew he possessed. And here to tell us more about Hadfield and those great Ranger teams is George Grimm, author of We Did Everything But Win. George, welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes.
Well, thanks for asking me on, Warren.
Hey, so let's start here. I read your book, and obviously you're a big New York Rangers fan. Tell everyone in the audience about your personal earliest memory of the New York Rangers and how you turned that love for a team, for a sport, into a career.
Oh, well, my father took me to my first Ranger game in the old garden when I was about 8, 9, 10 years old. This was in the late 50s, early 60s. And we sat in this side balcony, and I just fell in love with the game, the color, the atmosphere, the way the crowd reacted as one when something happened on the ice. And after the game, my father brought me down by the ice and showed me the penalty box and the players' benches and where the TV cameras and the press sat. And he kind of imparted on me that this was our team. So, ever since then, I've been a big Ranger fan, and it grew, from there. And then about the time I was 13, 14 years old, Emile Francis took over the Rangers. And he turned the team around. And I grew up watching those guys, and that's where my book came from. We Did Everything But Win. That was a labor of love, actually, because those were the guys that I grew up watching,
right?
And I wanted to tell their, about those teams and those plays and those games, those years.
It's an intoxicating sport. Once it gets in your blood, it's in there forever. It's a great game to watch.
Yes, it's true.
Hey, what about Vic Hadfield, subject of today's show? Off the top of your head, what do you remember best about him? What kind of player was he?
Vic was tough, and he actually came into the league as a tough guy, but he changed his game. He worked hard at it, changed his game, and he became a 50-goal scorer. But he first came into the league as someone who would fight and who would protect his club. I mean, he was 6 foot tall and 190 pounds, and at the time, the average NHL player was about 5'9", 180. And the Rangers were even smaller. They were only 175, their average weight. Mm-hmm. And the Rangers also had two of the smallest players in the league, Camille Henry and Val Fontaine, who were both maybe 150 pounds, and they were both,
You don't see a lot of that today. Yeah, you don't see a lot of that today.
No. But he actually turned his game around, and he actually had some skills. He, since there was only 6 teams in the league back then, and only I think 16 roster spots on each team. That's only 96 jobs in the league. So anyone was there had to have some kind of skill,
Yeah, you truly had to be one of the best in the world to play in the league back then.
Right.
Hey, the NHL obviously has a long history. In fact, the Stanley Cup is the oldest trophy awarded in team sports. So the league's been around for a while. And like other sports, There's a lot of nicknames when it comes to certain teams or units of a team. Football is littered with them, from the Steel Curtain to the Purple People Eaters to the Big Blue Wrecking Crew, the Doomsday Defense, the New York Sack Exchange, so many more. Baseball had the Gas House Gang, Murderers Row, even Harvey's Wallbangers. And hockey's no different. But when you drill further down in hockey, there's nicknames for lines. One of my favorites, the French Connection. Then there was the Triple Crown line, and of course, the GAG line, or Goal a Game line, which, as you pointed out in your book, was sometimes called the tagline. I didn't know that. 2 goals a game. Tell us about the GAG line.
The GAG Line was formed when Emil Francis needed someone to protect Jean Ratelle and Rod Gilbert. There was one game against the Maple Leafs that he had Camille Henry on the line. And Punch Imlach sent out his tough guys, including Eddie Shack, and he just killed all of them. And Emil, after the game, Emil was on his way home on the plane, and he said, "This isn't going to happen anymore as long as I'm here." So the next day, he grabbed Hadfield, and he told him that he was going to be on that line, and he said, if anyone goes near Gilbert or Ratelle, he should beat the crap out of them, or worse. And that's how it all came about. Now, the GAG Line played together from 1967 through 1974 when Vic got traded to Pittsburgh. And they got their name when Milton Gross of the New York Post wanted to write an article about them. And he asked somebody in the Ranger PR office, whose name was Arthur Friedman, who had a knack for nicknames, and he called him the GAG Line. And that's how they got the name, the GAG Line.
Wow. As you said, Hadfield wasn't originally put on a line with Ratelle and Gilbert. But by placing him there, not only did those two, Ratelle and Gilbert, reap the dividends of having Hadfield on a line with them, Hadfield reaped the dividends of being on a line with Ratelle and Gilbert. I guess what I'm getting at is Emil Francis, I don't think, never realized the offensive power that Hadfield would add. He knew how tough he was. He knew he could be an enforcer. He knew he could protect those two. How pleasant a surprise was it for Emil Francis to see just how good a goal scorer, how good offensively Vic Hadfield would become?
Well, it had to be. I mean, Vic scored 193 of his 262 Ranger goals on the GAG Line. So that's quite a bit. And he also had that 50-goal season, and for a long time he was the only Ranger to ever score 50 goals.
Right.
Now, Vic also helped by the curved blade. That was right around the time Bobby Hull came in with the curved blade, and Vic was helped by that for a while. But still, you still had to have the skill. You still had to be tough and stand your ground by the net and knock in the rebounds and take shots from the point. And he's a good player. He's a very, very good player.
Now, you mentioned the 50 goals, and that was a real magical year. It was 71-72, and he scored 50 goals, a record for the Rangers that wasn't broken, I think, until Adam Graves did it in 1994 with 52.
Right.
But there was disappointment, too. The team had this great line, and by this time, the Rangers were a great team. They just couldn't get over the hump and raise the cup. The closest they came was in that 71-72 season. They finished second to the Bruins that year, and in the quarterfinals, they beat Montreal 4-2. Then they swept Chicago in the semis before losing in the finals to Boston 4-2. Talk about that 71-72 season. Just how good were the Rangers, and how good was Vic Hadfield that season?
Well, if there was any Ranger team during the Emil Francis era that was going to win the Cup, it was the 1972 team, 71-72 team. But unfortunately, their best player, Jean Ratelle, went down with a broken ankle right before the end of the season. And they just ran out of gas, you know. Jean Ratelle came back later on in the series, but, you know, he had trouble turning, and it really wasn't, good for him.
Hadfield had a pretty good playoff that year, scored 7 goals, had 9 assists. How key was Vic Hadfield to the team?
He was a key player. He was the captain. You know, there was he was tough, and he also had the respect of his teammates, plus the respect of other players around the league. And he also knew how to keep the team loose. He was known as a prankster. He used to swap all the players' teeth. They used to put their false teeth in a cup by the locker, and he used to go around swapping all their teeth. And if they would have to walk around going, "Hey, Vic, where's my teeth?" And he was known to nail people's shoes to the floor, or swab Vaseline in them. He was just a funny guy. He was able to keep things loose.
That's awesome.
And that's important too, because it's a long season, long series, and you have to keep an even keel.
Hey, let's go back to the beginning. Where did Vic Hadfield learn the game, and what kind of player was he growing up?
Vic was born in October 1940 in Oakville, Ontario. He played local hockey until 1958 when he joined the St. Catharines Teepees of the OHA, where he accumulated 73 points in 202 penalty minutes. So
wow,
he was
that's a lot of penalty minutes.
Right. Now, the Teepees was sponsored by the Chicago Blackhawks in those days, so he was owned by them. They have won the trophy with a team that included Roger Crozier, Pat Stapleton, John Brenneman, Doug Robinson, Chico Mackey, guys like that. Hadfield turned pro in 1960 in the AHL, and he was claimed by the Rangers in the 1961 intra-league draft. And as I said before, the Rangers needed him because they were a small team, and he was bigger. He had size. He was aggressive, and he was able to protect his smaller teammates.
How did the Rangers find him? How did Emil Francis find out about him? And what were they expecting when they drafted him? They
saw that he had penalty minutes when he was in Buffalo, and they saw that he was tough, and they saw that he was willing to fight, to do what he had to do. And they also saw that he had skills, and he had to work at it. But he did that. He was willing to do that.
When he joined the Rangers, they were in the beginning of a complete metamorphosis. This was a team that routinely finished at or near the bottom of the NHL standings.
Right.
He was one of the first new players that Francis brought in. What was his original role with the team? He was
like on the third line. He was third line left wing, and actually Francis didn't bring him in. That was Mose Patrick. Mose Patrick drafted him. Because Francis really didn't take over the team until 1964. He was the assistant GM before that, but 1960 and 1961, Emil was the coach of the Guelph Mad Hatters in the OHA, where he had Jean Ratelle and Rod Gilbert up there. So he goes way back with those guys.
Now, Vic was not a prolific goal scorer, but man, he could mix it up. Now, you said that he was, at that time, a pretty big guy. in regards to NHL standards. Just how tough was he?
Vic would go one-on-one with the tough guys in the league. I mean, John Ferguson was the tough guy in the league. He was feared, but he was a good player. But Vic would go up against him. Vic was constantly going after Henri Richard. They had a battle every time the Rangers played Montreal. Vic would go up against Eddie Shack, Ted Green, all the known tough guys in the league. Vic would go up against them. And, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But, you don't back down. And Vic didn't back down.
What did that mean to the team, to the Rangers, to see a guy like this on their team protecting them? What does that mean to a team to have a guy like that?
Well, it's good to know that if something happens on the ice, you have someone who's going to have your back. I mean, Arnie Brown told me once that it was good to have Vic out there because he knew he had his back. Because Arnie could get himself in trouble once in a while. He could get into a fight, and he had to have someone else out there to protect him.
Sure. Hey, I just said just before, I said he wasn't really a prolific goal scorer, but he sure could find the back of the net when the opportunity presented itself. In fact, beginning with the 1967-68 season, he scored at least 20 goals every year for 9 straight years. How skilled was he with the puck, and how did his game evolve over the years?
Vic really didn't skate much with the puck. He was at the end of a pass from Jean Ratelle usually, and then they would shoot it. But he could shoot the puck high. He could shoot it fast. He had a very fast release, and he was a sharpshooter. He could find the holes when he had to.
Of course, as we talked about earlier, the Rangers, they were cellar dwellers when Vic joined the team. They routinely finished at or near the bottom of the standings, but that changed when stars like Gilbert and Ratelle, Walter Tkachuk, Brad Park, and others joined the team. They had some pretty good veterans, too, including Hadfield. They had a pretty darn good nucleus. Tell us about those Rangers of the late 60s and the early 70s that were finally becoming a franchise that every team in the NHL had to reckon with.
Yeah, well, once guys like Walter Tkachuk and Brad Park came on board, they got better. I mean, Brad Park was our Bobby Orr, and I think everyone who's my age anyway thinks back on Brad Park when he was young and what hope we had in him. And he was a very good player for us for a long time. And Walter Tkachuk, you couldn't knock him off the skates. Bill Fairburn was on the Bulldog line with Tkachuk. The other winger was Vickers later on, and the Vickers used to hang out by that post and knocking rebounds. And the third line was Stemkowski and Irvin and Bruce McGregor, and they were a good checking line, but they could score, and the Irvin could fight, and
they had a heck of a goalie at that time too.
Eddie Jockman and Jules Villeneuve, yep. One was a lefty, one was a righty. Emil used to love to switch them up, so the other teams wouldn't know where they were shooting that night. They won the Vezina the one year. I forget which year it was, but the first year that they brought up Jules Villeneuve to back up Eddie, that was when they won the Vezina trophy. Because he had Terry Sawchuk as a backup, and he had Don Simmons as a backup the year before that.
Was it just bad luck, or was there something else going? Was it just teams, always one team better than the Rangers? What prevented that team from winning the Stanley Cup during those years?
The people who I've spoken to, and this is what I think too. It's just that the other team's better players played better than the Rangers' best players. The Bruins had Bobby Orr. The Chicago Blackhawks had Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita. And they raised the game just a little bit more. I mean, Bobby Orr didn't have to raise his game too much. He was just a great player. Guys like Montreal had that whole mystique going for them, and it's a bad bounce once in a while. It's bad luck. You can't really blame injuries because every team has injuries. But I was talking to Bruce McGregor about it, and he said sometimes you just don't win. You could have the best. Sometimes you just don't win. And that's just what happened to the Rangers. And as I said, 1972 would have been their year, but it just didn't work out that way.
Yeah, it just happens. It happens today that there's great teams, and for whatever reason, they just doesn't matter the sport. They just can't get by a different team. Now, like, the Rangers had transformed themselves into a cup contender. Hadfield, he transformed his game as well. And his teammates and the team recognized just how important he was. And I think the role of the captain in hockey is much more significant than it is in any other sport. In fact, I'd say in most sports, the role of the captain is just, an honorary position, just something to say that you're the leader of the team. I don't think that's the case in hockey. So I have three questions for you here. First, what is the role of the captain in hockey? Then, how big of an honor is it? And then finally, on a team with so many stars, what did it mean to Vic when he was named captain of one of the most historic teams in sports? So let's start here. What's the role of the captain in hockey?
The captain has to keep the team together. The captain, if any players have any complaints about the way they're being played, they're supposed to go through the captain. And he's supposed to go to the coaching staff. And the other way around, too. The coaching staff is supposed to make their feelings known sometimes through the captain. Sometimes they just, do it themselves. But they hope that the captain will put pressure on players who haven't been playing well. Mark Messier was once famous for when he was in Edmonton. One of the players, I can't think of who it was right now, but one of the players wasn't playing well, and they were in the playoffs. And he actually grabbed the guy and said, "Listen, if you don't stop playing better, I'm going to have to kill you." And so you got to put fear in people sometimes, So, I don't think Vic ever did that, but he could. He was a tough guy, and I think if he looked at you, or he pointed his finger at you, or he let you know that you weren't living up to what you're supposed to be doing, you would play better. You would try harder. You would do whatever you had to do to get him on your side again.
How big an honor is it to be named captain of your hockey team?
Oh, Vic was very honored. He really enjoyed it. He was only captain for a short time, really, but he enjoyed it. And as I said, he knew how to keep the team loose, and he knew how to keep the team on their toes. And he also represented the team well in charity and functions around the city, and he was a good captain.
And to think that he was named captain of a team that had Ratelle and Gilbert and Kachuk and Park and Vickers and Eddie Jacquemin, although I don't know how many goalies were ever named captain. So many stars.
Sometimes the star player isn't the best captain.
Right.
Sometimes you need a guy who is a gritty player like Hadfield was. Someone who the game hasn't come that easy to, because the guy who had to work hard to get where he is, and he appreciates that he had to work hard to get where he is, and that hockey is hard work. any game is hard work, but you have to work hard to get where you want to be, and sometimes the star players just don't have that. They didn't have to work that hard to get where they are, but someone like Vic did.
Right, and it's the only sport where the captain, once in a while you might see it in another sport, but every single hockey team, someone's wearing the C, and there's usually one or two guys wearing an A. So being a captain is really important in hockey. Your book, We Did Everything But Win, has some great stories about the Rangers of the late 60s and the early 70s. And by the way, I love the format. Love the way you put it together. How did that idea come about to isolate the quotes from the players the way you did?
That's just the format that I had in my head when I started out. Everything about the book, I kind of had a model in my head about what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. As far as isolating the quotes, I had probably seen that somewhere else in the book that I read years ago or something, and it really, really helped me. And it also, from a writing point of view, it makes it easy because you don't have to say he said, he said, and he continued. You don't have to continue the sentences. You just put their quotes in quotes, and you're done with it.
It's a great way to write a book. Someday, if I ever write a book, that's what I'm going to do. So if listeners of Sports Forgotten Heroes want a good, entertaining read that also has some very humorous stories, you got to pick up George's book, We Did Everything But Win. And let's give listeners a little more of a taste, especially when it comes to Hadfield. Like you said earlier, he was somewhat of a prankster. He liked to have fun, and he took that to the ice, intentionally or not. I had to laugh when I heard about what he did with the mask of Bernie Parent. What happened?
Actually, Bernie was on the Maple Leafs at the time. And that was in the first round of the 1971 playoffs. The Rangers won the first game, but this was game 2. And they played the following night, so any bad blood that was from the previous night was still fresh the night after that. And this was a chippy game from the start, and it wound up that the Rangers were losing 3-1 in the third period when all hell broke loose. With about 5 minutes left in the third period, Hadfield went into the corner with Jim Harrison, and they were fighting, and everyone paired off, and all of a sudden Bernie Parent comes out of his net and goes over to the fight between Harrison and Hadfield and tries to help Harrison. Now, the Ranger goalie, Eddie Jockman at the time, he sees this, and he comes screaming down the ice, throwing off his mask, his gloves, his stick. The referee, Lloyd Gilmore, tried to hold him back, don't get involved. But he just went right past him, and he got involved. And then, of course, everyone came off the bench, and they fought for a while, and they calmed down. Then Hadfield pushed Harrison again, and they went back to fighting again. And finally, when everything was quiet and everyone was picking up their sticks and gloves, Vic saw Perrant's mask laying on the ice, and he flipped it into the stands. Flipped it into the stands. Now, Perrant is looking around for his mask, and he can't find it. He's getting upset. And, King Clancy from the Maple Leafs ran down that corner of the Gardens looking for it. The Garden police looked around to see if they could find the mask, but by that time, whoever had the mask was long gone. They just ran up the stairs and went home.
Heck yeah!
And since he only brought one mask, with him, Jacques Plante had to replace him. So they have the face-off for once everybody gets everything cleaned up, they have another face-off. And Teddy Irvin goes into the other corner, starts fighting with one of the Leafs, and Jacques Plante leaves his net again and gets involved. Eddie Jockman comes down again like the Lone Ranger, and he just gets involved with that fight too. Finally, order is restored. The Rangers end up losing the game, and they went on to win the series. But the Leafs were fined $16,000 for their part in the brawl. The Rangers were fined $8,000, I believe.
And Bernie Perrant lost a mask.
Yes, he actually had to order one from Jacques Plante's company, and it came before the Game 3. The original mask, though, was returned to the Rangers a few days later in an unmarked envelope, and no one knows where it came from or anything, but it was returned to them, and Emil Francis gave it back to Bernie Perrant.
By the way, for listeners out there, I just got to say this. Ted Irvine of the Rangers, if you're a World Wrestling Entertainment fan, if you love wrestling, Chris Jericho is Ted Irvine's son.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, there was yeah, go ahead.
Eddie was tough. Eddie was a tough guy. You know, all the tough guys in the league, he took them on too, and he was very tough. One of the reasons why Emil picked him up was because Emil saw him fight Barclay Plager and somebody else with St. Louis at the same time. He had these two guys at the same time, and Emil got him the next day from the Kings.
Wow. There's another game that was played at Madison Square Garden, and the goal judge clearly missed a goal. Emil Francis was not happy with the call. Can you tell us that story and Hadfield's involvement in that?
November 21st, 1965. Rangers were playing Detroit at the Garden, at the old Garden, and they were winning 2-1 late in the third period. Norm Ullman took a shot, and he just turned around and went up towards the other end of the ice. Like, he shot, it didn't go in. He was, headed back up ice. All of a sudden, the referee blew the whistle. He went over to the goal judge. They talked, and he went over to the scorer's table, and they put a 2 up on the board that the Red Wings had scored. And Emil Francis at the time was the general manager, and he went ballistic because he didn't think it was a goal. And he ran over to where the goal judge sat. Now, in those days, they just sat out in the crowd. They didn't have a booth around them. So he went over there, and he was arguing with the goal judge, who was named Arthur Reichert, who was a very well-respected man in the Garden. He had been there for quite a number of years. I think he was there from the 50s up until the 90s. And Emil was arguing with him, and his premise that the guy who took the shot turned around and went up ice, so he didn't think it went in. And as this was going on, there were some fans in the area who told Emil to sit down and shut up, and Emil told them to mind their business, and all of a sudden they all started to fight.
They had no idea who he was.
Right, they didn't know who he was. And, because at the time, this was 65. Emil had only been named GM in 64. So it's possible they didn't know who he was,
And he was fighting for them.
He was fighting for them. So, this is going on behind the glass, behind the net, and Vic sees what's going on, and he says, "Hey, that's Emil over there." So Vic and 5 other Rangers climbed this 9-foot glass.
Oh, man!
With their skates on, and they came to the rescue of their of Emil Francis. I mean, at the time, they had folding chairs back there. They didn't have regular seats; they had folding chairs. And Arnie Brown told me that when he came down from the glass, he put his foot right through one of these folding chairs. So there he was trying to fight and trying to get people off Emil, and his one leg has this folding chair on it, So it was very, very it was a very funny scene, but, it was crazy. So now when it was all over, the fans said that, they were sorry. They didn't know who he was, and no one was going to press charges against the other guy. But a few days later, Emil was served with papers that they were going to sue him.
Oh, man.
And it went through 2 court cases. The first one was thrown out. The second one, they won money. I don't remember how much, but they won money off the Rangers. And the game ended in a 3-3 tie. So.
He was selected to be a part of Team Canada. This particular team is one of the most celebrated teams in the history of hockey. I believe it is the only team itself as a whole to be voted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. The names on that team are legendary. Bobby Orr, Brad Park, Rod Gilbert, Yvon Cornwallis, Jean Ratelle, Ken Dryden, Phil Esposito. The list goes on and on and on. And, of course, there was Paul Henderson, who scored one of the most famous goals in the history of hockey. Hard to imagine there could be a down when talking about that team. But for Vic, it wasn't the best of experiences. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes. Vic was one of 5 Rangers that made that team. Ratelle, Rod Gilbert, Jean Ratelle, Brad Park, and Rod Sealing were the other 4. And Vic played with the GAG Line in Game 1, and they played well, but they didn't score anything, and they weren't scheduled to dress for Game 2, which was in Maple Leaf Gardens. And Gilbert and Ratelle understood that Harry Sinden, the manager of the team, had a lot of players he had to keep happy, and it was someone else's turn to play. Vic thought he was being slighted because the game was being played in Maple Leaf Gardens and it's near his hometown, and he was not happy with that. So that got things off on the wrong foot. And so Vic didn't play much throughout the 4 games that were in Canada. When they went to Europe, they played a few games in Sweden, I believe, just to get used to the larger ice surfaces. And Vic played there, and he played well. But then when they went to Russia, Vic was left off the practice roster. He didn't have a line to practice with one of the practices, and he was not happy with that. And Harry Sinden told him to just spell the other players, take their place when they got tired. And Vic just didn't want to do that. So he sat on the bench and read the paper. And Harry Sinden came over and told him, don't do that. If you're going to not play, just go and, change your clothes and go inside. So Vic threatened to go home. Alan Eagleson. Eagleson was the organizer of the whole thing, and he talked Vic out of going home then. But later that day, Vic did pack his bags, even though the rest of the Ranger players tried to talk him out of it. Vic did pack his bags and go home, and he got bad press for it when he got home that he didn't want to be part of the team. He deserted the Team Canada. He was jumping off his thing. Yeah, because at the time, Team Canada was losing the series, but he always did what he wanted to do. He always, was his own man, and he wasn't happy, and that was what he wanted to do.
What a shame. So there's 2 downers.
Yeah.
And like you said, the big downer was when the Rangers traded him, and they traded him to Pittsburgh. He had a pretty good run with the Penguins in his 2 full seasons with the team. He scored 31 goals and then 30 goals the following season, the second and third highest goal-scoring outputs of his career. So why did he call it quits after 2 years with Pittsburgh?
Well, Vic had, by that time, he had injury problems. He always, for the previous 4 or 5 years, he had trouble with his hands. He was always nursing broken hands. When he scored his 50th goal, he had a broken thumb on one hand, and he had torn ligaments on the other, and his hands had taped. His thumbs had to be taped to his forefingers, so that play. And he had bad ankles. He had ankle problems, and he was just, at the age where he just didn't want to go through that anymore.
Mm-hmm. For many players in all sports, they disappear from our radar after their playing days end, and we never hear about them again. Some just don't want to be heard from again. Of course, Vic being from Canada makes it a little bit more difficult for us down here in the States to keep tabs on him. While he has not exactly been in the limelight, he's certainly been somewhat active. In fact, his work with the Daniela Maria Arturi Foundation is quite significant. Can you tell us about the foundation, who Daniela was, the awful affliction she had, and what Vic's relationship to the family is?
Daniela has what you call black fan anemia, which is a rare childhood disorder resulting from the failure of bone marrow to produce red blood cells. Vic got involved with the program when one of his partners, Manny Arturi, mentioned it to him, and he explained the situation. And in 1996, and with Vic's help, they raised over $3 million for the fund.
Wow.
Now since then, since Vic got involved, they have raised over $37 million for the fund.
Whew.
Through charity events and anything that he could do. Vic really gives a lot of time to the DBA Center. If you'd like some information about it, Vic has a link on his website, which is VicHadfieldGolf.com. Vic owns a golf center up in Oakville, Ontario, and they'd be happy to hear from you.
Hey, in the end, how should hockey fans remember Vic Hadfield, and what impact did he have on the New York Rangers?
People should remember Vic as a guy who worked hard to get where he was. He actually had a metamorphosis. He came up as one kind of player, and he ended up as another kind. He came up as a tough guy, and he had skills, like I said, but at the time the Rangers were just hoping for the best. But in the end, he scored 50 goals, and he still backed up his teammates. Hard-working guy. He was a leader, and they should remember him that way. And he's always been there for the Ranger Alumni Association. He's been there for the fans. I've spoken to him a few times, and he was always there for me. And he's always been a very giving person, big-hearted giving person.
Do you think he gets the recognition he deserves?
Probably not, no. Because of the time span, the time that has passed, and perhaps because of the way he left the Rangers. But that was one game. That was a small portion of his career. He had many other great games that should overshadow that one episode.
Absolutely. He was a great player for a great team. George, I want to thank you for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes. Tell us a little bit more about your book, and for you, what was the most fun thing about writing it?
Well, actually talking to the players. I was born in New Jersey, and as I said, I looked up to these guys. They were my heroes, and to be able to pick up the phone and call them, and to have them treat me like an old friend, and to make time for me, and to call me back when they were busy, and it was just a big thrill, and it's the kind of thing that I'm very happy that the book was sold to a publisher and it's being read by people. But even if it didn't get that far, I would have been happy just to have that experience, to be able to talk to these guys. I mean, Emil Francis gave me so much time, and he's been so good to me. So he's been giving so much so many of his afternoons he gave me. I spoke to him for hours, and we're still friends. I still call him just to check up on him. He's 91 years old, and he's sharp as a tack. He can give you names and dates, and he still goes out and plays golf, and just a wonderful man. And I really enjoyed that part of the book, and I enjoyed researching it and writing it. It was a fun experience all the way through.
Awesome. And where can fans get a copy?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, probably other stores like Target and stuff. I know you can get it in Cosby's up by
the Garden.
In Jerry Cosby's. I had a book signing there a couple months ago, which was very exciting. And if you do go out and buy it, I hope you like it. You can find me on Facebook, and you can let me know if you want.
It's a great book. Really enjoyed it. George, thank you so much for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes. For his career, and this might surprise some people, Hadfield scored 323 goals and added 389 assists. With the Rangers, he totaled 262 goals and 310 assists, with his best season coming in 71-72 when he tallied 50 goals and 56 assists for a career-high 106 points. He also accrued 142 penalty minutes that year. He scored 20 goals for the Rangers in the 1967-68 season, and that was the least amount of goals he would score in a season again. In fact, his last year with the Pittsburgh Penguins, he scored 30 goals. In the playoffs, Hadfield found the back of the net 27 times and added 21 assists. Now, he only made one All-Star game during his career, and that also came in the 71-72 season as well. Why isn't Hadfield's career held in higher regard? It's really a tough question because without him, the Rangers might never have reached the heights they did in the late 60s and early 70s. He was captain of the team, and by being placed on a line with Ratelle and Gilbert, it allowed those two to really put the pressure on the rest of the league. Hadfield is in the Hockey Hall of Fame as a part of the great 1972 Team Canada team. But as Grimm relayed, that experience, as great as it was for the rest of Canada and NHL fans, it turned out to be not so great for Hadfield. But as far as Ranger fans are concerned, Vic Hadfield will go down as one of the greatest in team history. Next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to talk about the career of a golfer who was involved in one of the most incredible incidents in the history of sports, particularly golf. The scoring error in the 1968 Masters that cost Roberto Di Vincenzo a chance at glory and the green jacket. That's next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes. Once again, thank you to today's guest, George Grimm, and we'll see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.